Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? The air inside the tent was thick with the smell of sweat, canvas, and ego. Senior Chief Petty Officer Anna Sharma sat perfectly still, her back straight, her eyes forward, her expression unreadable. Around her, the Marines spoke in shorthand, their laughter sharp, their movements rehearsed. They were a pack, bonded by grit and arrogance. She was an island in their sea of desert camouflage, her navy blue name tape standing out like a bruise against all that brown. Captain Evans' voice cut through the stale air. Objective is ISR intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance. He pointed his swagger stick at the projected map as if it were a weapon. We insert at 0200 via Hello Assault, 5 clicks east of grid Papa Zulu 7. We hump to observation post Alpha here. Tap, tap, tap. His stick punctuated each word like a gavel. We record pattern of life, identify the HVT, confirm ID. No speculation, no mistakes. He paused, scanning the room. Every Marine sat like a statue, back straight, jaws tight. Then his gaze landed on her, and something subtle changed in the air. A flicker of hesitation, a faint shift in his tone. "Senior Chief Sharma," he said, finally acknowledging her presence, "from Naval Special Warfare Command, will be joining us as an attachment." Even the word attachment carried weight, a burden, not a contribution. A few of the Marines exchanged smirks. One of them, Gunnery Sergeant Rohr, a mountain of a man carved from bad choices and chewing tobacco, let out a low grunt of laughter. It was quiet, but it hit the air like a slap. Anna didn't react. Her hands rested loosely on her knees. She'd heard this before in Iraq, in the Philippines, in places so hot the sand could burn through your boots. Men who measured worth in muscle and volume. Men who thought silence meant weakness. They never lasted long in her world. "Her gear will integrate with Corporal Diaz's compact," Evans went on, his tone clipped. "Diaz, make sure she keeps up." "Yes, sir." Diaz's voice was obedient, but his glance at Anna was something else, pity maybe, or discomfort. He was young, barely out of his 20s, a cinder block of a Marine with tired eyes. The look said, "You don't belong here." The look said, "You'll slow us down." When the briefing ended, boots shuffled and gear clanked. The men stood, stretching, laughing again. Anna rose without hurry. Her equipment was laid out with surgical precision, lighter, smaller, and more advanced than theirs. Her rifle was a compact Honey Badger variant, customized for speed and silence. She double-checked her antenna, cables, and encrypted radio modules' movements as fluid and economical as breath. Gunny Rohr ambled over, arms crossed, a slow smile crawling across his face. "That at Senior Chief?" he asked, scanning her setup. "Don't see much sustainment gear. Desert gets cold at night, thirsty during the day." "I have what I need, Gunny," she said simply, not looking up. "Yeah," he grunted. "We move fast, we carry heavy. We don't have time to babysit. You fall behind, you call out, understood?" "Perfectly." Her tone was calm, almost soft, but it carried a weight he didn't quite recognize. He stared at her for a moment longer, irritated by her composure, then spat into an empty bottle and walked away. Outside, the sun was melting into the horizon, painting the desert gold. Soon it would be dark, and with it would come silence, the kind that swallowed noise, thought, and fear alike. Inside, Anna Sharma finished checking her rifle. Then she sat back and closed her eyes. She didn't sleep. She never slept before insertion. She just slowed her breathing, one inhale, one exhale, until her pulse matched the rhythm of the rotor blades she knew were coming. Regulation, centering, the calm before the noise. The others glanced at her occasionally, curious in spite of themselves. To them, she looked fragile, out of place. A woman with a calm face and a quiet stare sitting among men bred for chaos. But they didn't know the truth, that she'd spent more time in active war zones than any of them had in the Corps. They didn't know she'd buried her fear long ago, deep enough that even she couldn't find it anymore. The night swallowed the camp. When the CH-53 Stallion thundered in, the world shook. The helicopter's rotors tore at the darkness, kicking up a storm of dust and anticipation. The Marines boarded fast, loaded down with gear. Anna climbed in last. She didn't need to shout, didn't need to look around. She knew her place on the edge where she could see everything. The inside of the bird was red-lit, vibrating with power. The men sat shoulder to shoulder, checking weapons, muttering silent prayers. The air smelled like oil and adrenaline. Anna sat still, eyes closed, hands folded over her rifle. Her heartbeat slowed to match the rotor rhythm. In, out, control, always control. To the Marines, she was small, maybe even fragile. But there was something about her silence, not fear, not arrogance, something else. Something that made them uneasy. 15 minutes later, the ramp dropped. The desert wind screamed in, carrying sand and static. "Go, go, go!" Roar bellowed, his voice half drowned by the storm. The Marines spilled out into the black, forming a textbook perimeter, rifles up, scanning. Sharma was last off, her movements smooth, efficient, quiet. The night was alive with wind. The horizon was a jagged silhouette. Sand crunched under their boots like broken glass. They started moving. The first hour was brutal. The terrain was unforgiving, rock and sand, no rhythm, no mercy. Every step sank half an inch deeper than the last. The Marines set a pace that was meant to break spirits. Anna didn't flinch. Her breathing was even, her steps measured. The pack on her back didn't sway. She flowed, not marched. Corporal Diaz kept a few paces ahead, occasionally glancing back, expecting to see her stumble. She never did. After 2 hours, his neck ached from looking back too often. "Break," Captain Evans ordered at last. The men dropped to a knee, gulping water, catching breath. The wind carried whispers of exhaustion and disbelief. Roar walked the line, checking on his men until he stopped near Anna. She was kneeling, rifle across her thighs, eyes fixed on the dark ridge ahead. She hadn't touched her canteen. Her face was still, illuminated faintly by starlight. "You good, Senior Chief?" Roar asked, voice gruff, maybe even curious. "I'm good, Gunny," she said quietly. Then, almost as an afterthought, "Thermal anomaly, 200 meters north of the highest peak. Could be animal, could be listening post." Roar frowned, raising his own thermals. He scanned. Nothing at first, then a faint flicker of heat, gone as quick as it appeared. His jaw tightened. "Goat probably," he muttered. "Good eyes." He didn't say what he was thinking, that none of his scouts had seen it. He just moved on, uneasy. They reached their observation point an hour before dawn. Rocks, wind, nowhere to hide. The Marines went to work building cover, digging in. Sharma unpacked her own gear, a cluster of small, black boxes, thin wires, and a directional antenna no one recognized. From his position, Evans watched her, suspicion gnawing at the edges of his command. "Gunny," he said quietly, "she keeping up?" "Yeah," Roar admitted, spitting into the sand. "Hasn't said a damn word, just does her thing, don't like it. Quiet ones are always the weird ones." Evans nodded. "Her gear's secondary, our security's primary. If she compromises this position, she's on the first bird home." The wind picked up, a low, rising moan. The desert was preparing something. The sun bled over the horizon, washing everything in gold. Heat began to shimmer on the rocks. Hours crawled by. Marines took turns on watch while the rest tried to rest in the suffocating heat. Sharma didn't move. Her fingers danced across her tablet, tuning frequencies, listening to the invisible noise between static. One protein bar. Sips of water, minimal motion, maximum attention. The wind grew stronger. The sky turned the color of rust. "Storms coming in fast, Skipper," Roar warned. "Visibility going to hell." "We hold position," Evans snapped. "We're Marines, this is what we trained for." But training couldn't stop the desert. The storm hit like a fist. The sky vanished, replaced by a wall of sand that screamed through every seam and pore. Visibility dropped to nothing. Words were useless. The world became a roar, a storm that erased sound, shape, and sense. Then through the chaos came something else. A new sound, sharp, metallic. The crack of a rifle. And another. A scream, a thud. The Marines dove for cover, shouting orders that no one could hear. Return fire erupted, blind, desperate. Muzzle flashes blinked in the brown fog, there and gone. Another hit. A man went down. Anna lay flat, her body pressed into the ground. She didn't shoot, not yet. Her mind filtered the storm, searching for rhythm, pattern, sound. The enemy's rifle reports told her everything. Direction, distance, weapon type. She built a map in her head, silent and precise. Ambush, Diaz's voice barely carried over the wind. We're boxed in. Fall back, rally point Bravo. Evans screamed, his voice cracking under the roar. The Marines broke, dragging the wounded, retreating through the sand. In the chaos, no one looked for the Navy senior chief. Rohr glanced back once, saw only a curtain of sand. Nothing. "Where the senior chief?" he shouted. "I don't know," Diaz yelled. "I lost sight of her." "Leave her," Evans barked. "She's gone. We move now or we all die here. That's an order." Rohr froze for a heartbeat, then turned away. The storm swallowed them whole. They didn't mean to abandon her. Not really. It was panic, the kind that stripped you of humanity and left only instinct. In the brutal math of survival, she was the acceptable loss. When the last bootprint faded into the storm, Anna Sharma was alone. She didn't move for 3 full minutes. Then slowly she raised her head. The wind howled, but beneath it she heard movement, soft, cautious. Enemy fighters advancing. She stayed perfectly still. Her breath slowed. Her body temperature dropped. She became part of the landscape. A shadow appeared 10 meters to her right, a man moving low, rifle ready. His eyes swept over her hiding place, unseeing. He passed within arm's reach. The honey badger whispered twice. 2 suppressed shots. He dropped without a sound. She was already moving, not backward, not forward, but sideways, vanishing into the storm's dying breath. No panic, no anger, no thought of the ones who left her. Just the mission. And as the sandstorm thinned to nothing, the truth settled quietly in the dust. They hadn't abandoned her. They had released her. And soon they would learn what that really meant. What happens in the mind of a soldier when the silence becomes too loud. When the wind dies and the storm clears. When the radio is dead and no one calls your name. What do? You listen, you breathe, and you remember what you were trained for. The desert was a graveyard of sound, wind whispering over rock, the hiss of cooling metal, the faint, wet crackle of sand against fallen bodies. Anna Sharma didn't move. Her body was pressed against the ground, her cheek resting on a bed of grit and blood. The last of the storm was dissolving into the dawn. The world was gray now, still, empty, and cruelly beautiful. She opened her eyes. The horizon was clean again, wiped of chaos. But there were shapes moving within it, shadows with rifles, men walking cautiously through the aftermath of their ambush. She counted 6 at first, then 9, then 12. They were laughing, gathering weapons, taking photos. Her heart didn't race, it slowed. That was her gift. One of the fighters knelt beside a fallen Marine. He ripped the American flag patch from the uniform sleeve, held it up, and shouted something triumphant in Pashto. The others roared back. They were celebrating. Sharma's jaw tightened, but she didn't blink. Anger was energy, and energy was fuel, but only if you burned it slow. She waited, watched, listened. Their accents told her where they came from. Their spacing told her how they'd move. Their weapons, mismatched, some old, some new, told her their discipline was thin. She could have taken 2 of them right then, maybe 3, but that wasn't the mission. Slowly, with movements small enough to be invisible, she slipped her hand toward her wrist-mounted GPS. One press of her thumb sent a single encrypted signal, a duress code. Alive, alone, compromised. No response came. She didn't expect one. SEALs trained for this exact silence. She rolled her shoulders, feeling the weight of her gear. the familiar ache of dehydration pressing behind her eyes. Then she melted backward into the rocks, the desert swallowing her whole. No trail, no sound. A ghost. By late morning, the sandstorm was gone. The world shimmered under a merciless sun. Heat radiated from every surface, distorting the air. The enemy fighters were moving now, a loose patrol heading toward the compound they called home. Anna trailed them at a distance, 500 meters behind, always just outside their awareness. She didn't walk on their tracks, she walked around them, on high ridges where wind would erase her prints. Her steps were short, deliberate, toes first, a rhythm only desert creatures knew. Every hour she stopped, took a sip of water, just one, wet the tongue, not the throat. She ignored hunger. Hunger was noise. Through her scope she studied them, cataloging, observing, remembering. Names formed in her head, not their real ones but ones that fit their rhythm. Leader, radio, the joker, the man who kept looking over his shoulder, the nervous one. She studied their weapons, Kalashnikovs and SVD, a PKM light machine gun, unstable mix, no discipline, loud, careless, deadly in chaos, but only in chaos. By the time the sun began to drop, her plan had already started writing itself. They made camp in a shallow wadi, a small depression surrounded by jagged rocks, the kind of place Marines would have avoided but insurgents loved. It trapped the wind and hid the noise. They built a fire. They were laughing again, always laughing. The flames glowed bright, a foolish mistake, heat against cold air, a beacon for anyone watching. Anna crouched on a high ridge above them, a shadow wrapped in a thermal blanket. Her body was still, her mind was. Every movement below was a number, a vector, an equation waiting to balance. She unpacked her gear, the small black boxes she'd carried through the storm. She assembled her antenna, angled it toward the distant compound, and powered her system on. The screen came alive, a flood of data, frequencies, pulses, chatter. This was her true battlefield, not sand, not rifles, signals. The invisible war that decided the visible one. Her fingers moved across the tablet, filtering frequencies, decoding fragments. The enemy's comms discipline was a disaster. Open channels, reused codes, no encryption. Within an hour, she'd mapped their entire network. Every call sign, every voice, every command structure. One voice repeated often, older, steady. Mullah Abdul Qadir, the high-value target. He was expecting a delivery at dawn. SAMs, surface-to-air missiles. She froze, her eyes narrowed. The Marines had been sent for ISR reconnaissance only. Observe, report, exfil. That was the rule, but rules didn't survive storms. She had a choice. Sit still and survive. Or act and change everything. Her thumb hovered over the radio input. The men below her were asleep now, their laughter replaced by the soft rhythm of snoring. The decision came quietly, without drama, without ceremony. She switched the channel. Listened to Qadir's compound traffic. Zard's patrol hasn't checked in. They will, the storm delayed them. Check again at sunrise. Zard. So that was their leader, the one laughing over the dead Marines' bodies. She looked down at the camp, 10 tents, 12 men, all asleep. Her pulse didn't rise. She unlatched her pack, left the bulky signal gear behind, hidden beneath a cairn of stones. She took only what she needed. Rifle, sidearm, knife, one grenade. The wind shifted, cold now, the kind that crept into joints and whispered of death. She moved. No sound, no wasted motion. Just breath, sand, steel. The first sentry sat near the dying fire, his rifle across his knees, eyes half closed. Anna approached from behind, every footstep placed in rhythm with the wind. A soft from her suppressed rifle. One shot, center of mass. He slumped forward, never making a sound. The second guard turned, confused by something he didn't understand. Her hand clamped over his mouth, her blade finding the space beneath his jaw, upward into the brainstem. Instant. Silent. She lowered him gently. 10 more. She moved through their camp like smoke, tent to tent, canvas walls breathing with each breath. She didn't rush. Every movement was deliberate. A shadow slipped under the flap. A heartbeat. Then nothing. The fire sputtered once, reflected in her eyes, then died. When she emerged again, the camp was silent. The night wind carried only the sound of the desert. She collected their water, ammunition, a pouch of dried dates, and most importantly, their radio. Then she vanished back into the ridgeline, a ghost once more. The sun rose on a still world. 12 men lay in the dust, their lives cut as cleanly as their throats. No one heard them die. No one would find them for hours. By the time they did, Anna would be gone. 20 kilometers away, Captain Evans' battered platoon was licking its wounds. They'd lost 4 Marines, 2 wounded, the rest shaken, silent. Evans sat hunched over a satellite phone, reporting failure. "We were outmaneuvered," he said, the words bitter in his mouth. "Ambushed during the storm, 4 KIA, 2 wounded, mission compromised." He didn't mention Anna. Not really. Just a faint line in the report, Navy attachment missing, presumed KIA. Gunny Rohr sat nearby, cleaning his rifle like a man trying to wash away guilt. The barrel gleamed under the harsh sun, but his eyes were hollow. He saw her face when he closed his own eyes, calm, still. "I have what I need, Gunny." He'd mocked her. Now he wasn't so sure she'd ever needed them at all. Diaz sat beside the comms pack, scanning frequencies out of habit. Static. Nothing. Then a faint pulse. "Gunny, wait," he said suddenly. "Got something weak, encrypted but sloppy." Rohr leaned in. The sound resolved slowly, Pashto chatter, broken but clear enough. No response from Zard's patrol. They were supposed to check in at sunrise. "Find them." Another voice, older, deeper, Kadir himself. "Double the guard. Someone did this. The ghost they speak of from Korangal, she's real." Rohr froze. His skin went cold despite the heat. He'd heard that name before. Whispered in war stories, late nights in Helmand and Kandahar. A legend. A phantom. They called her Kali, the ghost who dismantled entire networks, unseen, unheard. Evans saw the look in his NCO's eyes. "What is it, Gunny?" Rohr swallowed hard. "It's her," he said quietly. "It's Sharma." The tent went silent. No one spoke. Even Evans' arrogance cracked, replaced by something closer to awe. Somewhere out there, the woman they'd left for dead was rewriting the story. Back on the ridge, Anna sat cross-legged beside her radio, eyes fixed on the distant compound. Her fingers traced the edge of a small black device, a frequency spoofer, one of her prototypes. Her lips were dry, cracked, but her hands were steady. Through her scope, she saw movement on the horizon, a cloud of dust, a truck bouncing across the desert floor. The delivery. She exhaled slowly, adjusting the device's frequency. The insurgents had rigged IEDs along the approach road to protect their compound. During her earlier intercept, she'd caught fragments of the signal codes they used for detonation. She could use them now. One pulse, one command. And maybe the desert would help her finish what the Marines had started. She waited. Patience, always patience. The truck approached, slowing near the gate. Armed men waved it in, unaware. Anna aimed the spoofer. Her thumb hovered over the trigger. The world held its breath. Then she pressed. A single coded burst rippled through the air, invisible, perfect. For a second, nothing. Then the desert erupted. The road exploded in a chain of fire and steel. Buried IEDs detonated in sequence, a rolling thunder of destruction that lifted the truck skyward. Its cargo, the missiles, cooked off, streaking into the sky like dying stars. The compound vanished in smoke and screams. Anna didn't flinch. She didn't celebrate, she just watched, listened, felt the tremor roll through the earth beneath her palms. Then she powered down her gear, packed her rifle, stood. Mission complete. Somewhere behind her, Marines watched the same plume of smoke rising into the sky. They didn't know what they were seeing. But Roar did. That, he said softly, almost reverently, is a Navy SEAL. Evans stared at the smoke, silent, humbled. His command, his pride, all reduced to dust and awe. And somewhere in that same desert, Anna Sharma walked alone through the heat haze, a silhouette against fire and ruin, her pace steady, her eyes forward. She wasn't running, she wasn't hiding. She was just leaving. The mission was over. Her message was not, how do you face the silence of your own mistakes? The desert had gone still again. The wind was gone. The explosions were gone. Only the echo of them remained like ghosts whispering across endless dunes. Captain Evans stood on the ridge, his eyes fixed on the black column of smoke clawing its way into the sky. The sight was both terrible and magnificent. What the hell just happened? Someone murmured. No one answered, because deep down they already knew. Gunny Roar's face was turned toward the horizon. His jaw clenched, his eyes narrowed against the glare. He'd seen many things in 20 years of war, firefights, ambushes, miracles, and failures, but nothing like this. That, he said finally, voice low and gravel-worn, wasn't luck. Evans didn't reply. His pride was bleeding somewhere inside him, slow and invisible. He wanted to believe it was an airstrike, an accident, divine intervention, anything but what it was. But deep down, he knew the truth. They left her, and she was still out there, alive, operating, finishing the mission they couldn't. The Marines' rally point was a skeleton of exhaustion. 2 wounded men lay under a tattered tarp, their bandages soaked through. The rest sat in the dust, silent, drinking rationed water, cleaning weapons that no longer needed cleaning. No one spoke about the ambush. No one spoke about her, but her absence pressed down on them like the heat, heavy, inescapable, merciless. Corporal Diaz stared at the radio, the one Sharma had helped configure before the storm. Static hissed softly, like a dying heartbeat. He turned a dial, more out of habit than hope. She sent a burst signal, he said quietly. Right before the storm hit, I caught the tail of it on the backup band. Duress code. Roar looked up, meaning what? Alive, alone, compromised. Roar exhaled slowly. He wiped sweat from his face with the back of his hand. She knew the score, he muttered. Didn't ask for rescue, just sent the signal, like protocol says. Evans said nothing. He sat apart from the rest, helmet off, his expression carved from stone. His uniform was streaked with dust, his eyes sunken from sleeplessness. Every few minutes he'd look at the smoke again, then back to the radio, as if waiting for some impossible call to confirm what his pride refused to accept. At last, Roar walked over and stood beside him. For a long time, neither man spoke. The silence between them was heavier than any words. She's alive, Roar said finally. Evans didn't look at him. You don't know that. Roar gave a slow, tired nod. Yeah, I do. Evans looked down, his voice brittle. You think she pulled that off? I don't think, Roar said. I know. I've seen things, Captain, heard stories. The kind that sound like myths until you meet someone who fits the shape of them. She fits. Evans stared at the ground. You think she's that ghost, the one they talk about? Roar's gaze drifted back toward the smoke. I don't know what she is, he said softly, but I know what she's not. She's not dead, and she's not ordinary. The desert doesn't forgive arrogance. It strips you bare, skin, spirit, certainty, until you face who you really are. Anna Sharma walked alone across that desert, her pack cutting a clean shadow behind her. Her pace never faltered. She'd spent years in landscapes like this, places where heat could kill faster than bullets, where the horizon played tricks and distance mocked you. Her water was half gone, her protein bars were crumbs, but she moved like it didn't matter. She stopped only once on a ridge overlooking the remains of the compound. It was still burning. The air shimmered with heat and the faint metallic scent of spent explosives. She raised her scope and watched. Men were running, shouting orders, dragging the wounded, waving rifles at nothing. The world they'd built was collapsing around them. Her face remained calm, but deep behind her eyes a thought flickered. This isn't victory, it's balance. Then she lowered the scope, turned, and kept walking. By noon, the sun was a white blade in the sky. The horizon wavered like liquid glass. The world hummed with heat. Anna's steps slowed. The fatigue was settling in now, seeping into her bones. She paused under the skeletal shadow of a rock formation, crouched low, and unlatched her pack. She took a sip of water, let it sit in her mouth before swallowing. Her tongue was cracked, her lips bleeding, but her breathing stayed even. From the pouch on her thigh she pulled out a small notebook, the kind that looked unimportant, forgettable. Inside were sketches, frequencies, coordinates, notes written in a hand so neat it looked mechanical. She flipped to a blank page, wrote one line. ISR complete, SAM threat neutralized. Below it she added another. Team presumed KIA, mission parameters exceeded, exfil underway. Her handwriting was steady, detached, professional. She closed the notebook and tucked it back into her vest. Then she looked at the sky, pale blue, endless, merciless, and whispered to no one, almost done. 6 hours later, the Marines were moving again. Evans led them in silence, Roar behind him, Diaz carrying the comm pack. They were heading toward the designated exfil plateau, the only possible place a rescue bird could land. The march was punishing. Their gear was heavy, their spirits heavier. Every man carried the same unspoken thought: what if she's there? Evans kept his eyes on the terrain ahead, his mind wrestling itself into knots. His pride told him to stay cold, rational. His conscience told him he'd made a mistake that would haunt him for the rest of his career. And somewhere between those two voices, another whispered quietly, one that sounded almost like respect. "Gunny," he said after a while, "if she made it to the exfil point, what do you think she'll do?" Roar didn't look at him. "Wait," he said, "like she was trained to." Evans nodded slowly. "And if we show up?" "She'll look at us," Roar said, "the same way she did in that briefing tent. Calm, silent, like we're noise she already learned to ignore." By the time they reached the final rise, the sun was sliding toward the horizon. Long shadows stretched over the plateau. The air shimmered with that strange, heavy stillness that comes just before nightfall. "Movement 1 o'clock," Diaz whispered. Roar raised his binoculars, then froze. She was there, sitting on a flat rock near the edge of the plateau, back straight, helmet off, her rifle disassembled on a small cleaning mat beside her, each piece laid out with perfect order. She wasn't hiding, she wasn't even watching the perimeter. She was just cleaning her weapon. Evans stared through his scope, his throat tightened. Her face was streaked with dust, lips dry, eyes calm. When she noticed them approaching, she didn't flinch, didn't stand, just looked up, steady, neutral, unreadable. He walked forward alone, boots crunching softly on the gravel. The others stayed back, watching in silence. When he stopped a few feet from her, the desert was quiet enough to hear the click of metal as she reassembled her rifle. Bolt carrier, charging handle, magazine. Evans opened his mouth to speak, but the words tangled in his throat. "Sorry, thank you, we were wrong." None of them felt enough. So he said nothing. Sharma slid the bolt home, gave it a clean snap. The rifle was whole again. She set it down beside her, then looked up at him. Her eyes held no anger, no satisfaction, just stillness. Gunny Roar stepped forward next. He unclipped his canteen, the last one that wasn't empty. He held it out to her, his voice rough. "You're probably dry, Senior Chief." For a moment she just looked at it. Then slowly she reached out and took it, unscrewed the cap, took a long, deliberate drink. When she handed it back, her voice was quiet but steady. "Thank you, Gunny." That was all, no accusation, no speeches, just calm acceptance. And somehow, that calm was heavier than any blame could have been. Evan's chest felt hollow. The weight of what he'd done leaving her, doubting her, pressed down on him until it hurt to breathe. He wanted her to yell, to demand an explanation, something. But she didn't. Because she didn't need to. Her silence said everything. An hour later the helicopter arrived, a distant hum that grew into a roar. The Marines formed a perimeter, instinctively, out of habit. Sharma didn't move. She sat where she was, watching the dust swirl in the rotor wash. When the bird touched down, Evans gave her a small nod. "After you, Senior Chief." She picked up her pack, slung it over her shoulder, and walked past him without a word. The flight back was silent. No banter, no jokes, just the low vibration of the engines and the occasional creak of gear. Evans stared at the floor. Roar sat across from him, watching Sharma out of the corner of his eye. She was looking out the window, expressionless, distant. No pride, no anger, just quiet gravity. When the base lights finally appeared on the horizon, Evans exhaled, a slow, weary breath that didn't feel like relief. It felt like confession. Back at the forward operating base, the debrief was quick and clinical. Evans gave his report, his tone stripped of all bravado. He didn't lie exactly, but he didn't tell the whole truth either. During the chaos of the sandstorm, Senior Chief Sharma became separated from the unit, he said. She independently completed reconnaissance and neutralized a high-value threat. Her actions prevented further casualties. The officers nodded. The words sounded neat, sanitized, heroic. Sharma stood beside him, silent. When asked if she had anything to add, she simply said, "The captain's summary is accurate. My full report will be submitted through command channels." And that was it. No recognition, no confrontation, just the clean, quiet efficiency of professionals who didn't need validation to know the truth. Later that night, under the harsh glow of a single floodlight, Sharma sat alone at a workbench, disassembling her rifle one last time. The metal gleamed under her hands. Footsteps approached. She didn't turn. Gunny Roar stopped beside her. He didn't speak. He just reached into his pocket and placed something on the table, a K-bar knife, its leather handle worn smooth. Beside it, a small metal coin engraved with the Force Recon emblem. He looked at her, eyes tired but soft. "From the boys," he said quietly. She looked at the coin, then at him. No words, just a small nod. He returned it, a silent salute between warriors, then walked away into the darkness. Sharma turned the coin over in her hand, feeling its weight. She slipped it into her pocket, left the knife on the table. She didn't need another weapon. She already was one. As she walked toward the airfield, the sky burned orange and purple. The engines of a waiting aircraft hummed softly in the distance. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. The desert had already written her story in silence, in fire, and in the unspoken lesson she'd left behind. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. How do you come home from something no one knows you did? The desert was behind her now, but the silence came with her. It always did. The transport plane hummed like a lullaby for ghosts. Inside, the cabin lights were dim, the kind of pale yellow that made every face look hollow. The Marines slept in fits and starts, their bodies twitching with dreams they wouldn't admit to having. Senior Chief Anna Sharma sat alone near the back. No one had told her where to sit, so she chose the seat nearest the rear hatch, the farthest from everyone else. Her rifle case lay at her feet, cleaned, oiled, ready. Her headset rested around her neck, though there was no calm channel to tune into now. She wasn't listening for orders anymore. She watched the desert through the small circular window. It looked peaceful from here, endless and indifferent. From above, you couldn't see the blood. Captain Evans sat a few rows ahead. He hadn't spoken to her since they'd boarded. Every time he turned his head, his gaze brushed her direction, then slipped away like a man afraid of touching a live wire. Gunny Roar wasn't afraid. He just sat quietly across the aisle, his arms crossed, his mind elsewhere. Every few minutes he'd glance at her, not out of curiosity but out of respect, the kind of respect that words couldn't carry. He'd seen Marines break under far less. He'd seen men come back haunted by the things they failed to do. But this woman, she didn't look broken. She looked steady, like a storm that had learned to live inside its own calm. When the wheels touched down on the runway, no one cheered. The base lights streaked past in long, white lines. Another mission finished. Another line of names on a report. The ramp dropped, and the night air hit them warm, damp, carrying the faint smell of jet fuel and dust. Sharma was the last one off. Her boots touched the ground like she was stepping onto a memory. The debrief room was cold, bright, and sterile. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, cutting every shadow into pieces. A single American flag hung behind the table. Beneath it sat 3 officers from Naval Special Warfare Command and 1 from Marine Recon Liaison. Evans stood at attention, his uniform crisp, his eyes bloodshot. Roar stood behind him, silent, stone-faced. Sharma sat at the end of the table, hands folded neatly in her lap. The lead officer, Commander Huxley, looked at her file. Senior Chief Anna Sharma, Signal Intelligence Specialist, attached to Recon Platoon Bravo under Captain Evans' operational command. "Yes, sir," she said evenly. He flipped another page. "You were separated from the unit during a sandstorm and later reestablished contact. During that time, you independently neutralized a hostile cell and destroyed a shipment of surface-to-air missiles. Is that accurate?" "Yes, sir." Huxley leaned back. "Your report matches satellite confirmation. The compound is gone. The SAMs are destroyed. No further activity in that sector." He paused. "Casualties?" "Enemy, 12 confirmed KIA at the forward patrol site. Additional estimated 15 to 20 during the compound explosion. Friendly, 4 Marines killed in action, 2 wounded." "And yourself?" Sharma looked directly at him, unaffected. There was no pride in her tone, no humility either, just truth flat and unembellished. The officers exchanged glances. The Marine liaison cleared his throat. "Captain Evans' report attributes the success of the operation to Senior Chief Sharma's initiative and exceptional field conduct." Evans stared straight ahead. His voice was steady, but there was a tremor beneath it. "She completed the mission, sir. We wouldn't have made it out without her." The room went still. For a brief moment the air changed. Everyone understood what wasn't being said. No one mentioned the word abandoned. No one asked why she'd been left behind. Huxley closed the folder. "The record will reflect mission success. You're both cleared for temporary rest and reassignment pending review." Evans saluted sharply. Sharma simply nodded. That was it. No medals, no ceremony, just paperwork and silence. The meeting ended, and the room emptied, leaving her alone with the echo of closing doors. Outside, the base was alive again, generators humming, trucks rolling, the faint thud of helicopter rotors in the distance. Life went on. It always did. Sharma walked across the tarmac toward her quarters, her bag slung over her shoulder. Her steps were slow now. The adrenaline was gone. What was left was the weight, the kind that didn't show up on scales. She passed a group of Marines laughing near the motor pool. One of them stopped mid-laugh when he saw her. He nudged the others. They turned, their voices dropping. They didn't say anything, but she could feel it, the shift in the air, curiosity, fear, reverence. The story was already spreading. It always spread faster than the truth. By the time she reached her quarters, the whispers had begun. The Navy ghost, the one who came back, the woman the desert couldn't kill. Inside her small room, she closed the door and sat on the edge of the bed. For a moment, she just stared at the floor. The hum of the air conditioner filled the space where thoughts should have been. Then she opened her duffel and began unpacking, rifle first, then sidearm, then the small, battered notebook. She turned to the last page, where she'd written her final note from the desert. ISR complete, SAM threat neutralized, exfil successful. She stared at it for a long time. Then, in neat block letters, she added one more line. No one left behind. Her pen paused. The words hung there heavier than ink. She closed the notebook and set it aside. Gunny Roar found her that evening, working alone under a floodlight by the equipment bench. Her sleeves were rolled up, her hands slick with oil as she cleaned her rifle for the second time that day. He didn't say a word. He just stood there for a moment, watching. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled something out, a coin. His coin. Force Recon emblem engraved in brass, edges worn from years in combat. He set it down beside her rifle. For you, he said quietly. She looked at it, then at him. I didn't earn that. Yeah, he said. You did, you just don't want it. She looked down at the coin again, running her thumb over its surface. It's not about wanting. Roar nodded slowly. I know. He stepped back, hands on his belt. They'll make noise about this, he said. Command, politics, maybe even the press if someone talks. You'll disappear for a while, then come back in a new file. That's how it works. Sharma didn't respond. She just kept cleaning her weapon, her motions precise and rhythmic. You don't talk much, do you? He said. She finally looked up. Most people don't listen much. Roar gave a small laugh, rough, genuine, fair. He turned to leave, then stopped. You saved us, Senior Chief. You didn't have to, you could have just disappeared. No one would have blamed you. She stared at the weapon parts on the bench. That's not who we are. Roar nodded. No, it's not. Then he walked away, his boots fading into the night. Hours later, the base quieted. The floodlights buzzed. The desert wind whispered against the metal siding of the hangars. Sharma stood by the runway, her pack on her back again. A transport aircraft idled nearby, its engines low and steady. She handed her paperwork to the loadmaster, routine, detached. Where to, ma'am? He asked. Norfolk first, then classified, she said. He nodded, checking her manifest. You traveling alone? She almost smiled, a small fleeting thing that vanished as soon as it appeared. Always. As she climbed the ramp, she paused halfway, looking back at the horizon. The night sky was clear, stars spread like salt across a black ocean. The same sky that had watched her in the desert, the same silence that had kept her alive. She didn't feel pride, not triumph, just something quieter, the understanding that survival wasn't victory, it was continuation. And continuation was its own kind of courage. Inside the aircraft, she found an empty seat by the window. She took out the Force Recon coin, turned it in her hand, and studied its gleam under the cabin light. For a long time she said nothing. Then, almost under her breath, she whispered, "They learned Gunny." She closed her eyes. The engines roared, the plane lifted, the lights of the base shrank into the darkness. Below her the desert slept quiet, endless, unknowable. Above it one woman flew home, not as a hero, not as a ghost, but as a lesson. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let the silence tell the story. What happens when silence becomes louder than the truth? Weeks passed. The desert faded into reports, and reports faded into files. The world moved on because it always does. At Naval Special Warfare Command in Norfolk, the hallways smelled like disinfectant and bureaucracy. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, flickering with the faint fatigue of long service. Men and women in uniform walked briskly, their faces unreadable, their lives measured in rotations, deployments, debriefs. Senior Chief Anna Sharma walked among them, unseen in plain sight. Her uniform was perfect, crisp creases, ribbons aligned, the subdued seal insignia glinting under artificial light. She carried no expression, her steps made no sound. If anyone glanced her way, they saw professionalism, nothing more. What they couldn't see were the echoes still lodged behind her eyes. The wind, the sand, the faces of men who hadn't come back, the sound of her own breathing under a storm that could have swallowed her whole. They called her the ghost who walked back. They didn't say it to her face, but she could feel it when she entered a room. Conversations would taper, eyes would shift, respect and discomfort intertwined. Legends grow in silence, and Anna's silence was fertile ground. She sat in the debrief auditorium, the kind built more for control than for comfort. Rows of polished desks, projector humming, the senior brass at the front, suits and stars. "Operation Falcon Dune," began Rear Admiral Cutter, his voice smooth and detached. "Official report, mission success. High-value threat neutralized. Surface-to-air missile network dismantled. No further enemy activity in the region." He clicked a slide. Satellite imagery filled the screen, scorched earth, black scars against gold sand. "The question," he continued, "is not what happened. The question is how." He turned to face her. "Senior Chief Sharma," he said, "walk us through your actions after separation." Her hands rested neatly on the table. "Yes, sir." She spoke with the precision of a clock, calm, direct, devoid of dramatics. Insertion, sandstorm, ambush, retreat, isolation, signal intercept, target analysis, improvised countermeasure, detonation, exfil. Every sentence was clean, efficient, the way an operator is trained to think. Cutter listened, nodding slowly, fingers steepled. "You engaged enemy forces alone, 12 confirmed kills, then triggered an IED chain reaction to destroy the SAM shipment." "Yes, sir." "No contact with higher command." "Negative, comms were down. I transmitted duress and acted on collected intelligence." "And you're confident your decision was justified?" Anna's gaze didn't waver. "If I hadn't acted, those SAMs would have been operational within 12 hours. They would have taken down a friendly transport, possibly two. I wasn't there to watch that happen." The room went still. Cutter's eyes narrowed, then slowly he nodded. "Understood." He leaned back, studying her. "You understand, Senior Chief, that actions taken outside the mission parameters will raise questions?" "Yes, sir." "You also understand," he added, "that results like this tend to silence them." Anna said nothing. Cutter looked at her for another moment, then closed the folder. "That'll be all." As she stood to leave, he added quietly, "Your father would have been proud." She paused just for a heartbeat, then walked out without a word. Outside, the corridor felt colder. "Your father would have been proud." The words hit something old inside her, something she'd buried a long time ago. Commander Raj Sharma, Navy SEAL, killed in action, Helmand Province, 2006. She was 15 when they folded the flag and handed it to her mother. They said he died saving his team. No one mentioned how he'd been left behind first. Anna had learned early what the military doesn't say out loud, that valor and abandonment sometimes live side by side in the same after-action report. And now, all these years later, she'd lived it too. That night she couldn't sleep. She sat in her quarters, staring at the Force Recon coin on her desk. The brass gleamed under the lamp, worn smooth by someone else's years, now carrying hers. She turned it over and over in her hand. The edges pressed into her palm like small, deliberate reminders. You were there, you survived, you mattered. But survival wasn't the same as peace. Her reflection in the window looked back at her, same calm eyes, same still face. But behind them the question burned. What was it all for? The men who doubted her now respected her. The ones who abandoned her now told her story in hushed reverence. And yet she felt nothing. Maybe because she hadn't done it for them. Maybe because it wasn't about revenge or redemption. It was about something simpler, something quieter. Duty. Not the kind written in orders or shouted by superiors. The kind that exists in silence. The kind that doesn't need an audience. A week later, she sat on a pier near the docks, dressed in civilian clothes, jeans, gray t-shirt, hair tied back. The sea was calm, gray under an overcast sky. Gunny Roar found her there. He walked up slowly, carrying 2 paper cups of coffee. "Didn't think you'd still be around," he said, handing her one. "I'm not," she replied. "Technically, I fly out tomorrow." He nodded. "They told me." They sat there for a while, the waves tapping against the wood, gulls calling overhead. "Got word from Evans," Roar said finally. "He's being reassigned, desk job at Pendleton. I think he asked for it." Anna nodded. "He'll carry it, that's enough." Roar sipped his coffee. "And you?" "Debrief complete. Classified rotation next." "Meaning you disappear again?" "Meaning I keep doing the job." Roar gave a small, dry smile. "You ever stop?" "Only when I stop breathing." He looked at her then, not the uniform, not the legend, but the person underneath. "You ever think about what it costs?" She didn't answer right away. The wind carried salt and silence between them. "Every day," she said finally. "The trick is not to count it." He nodded slowly. "That's a dangerous kind of honesty." She turned to him. "It's the only kind worth having." For a long moment neither spoke. Just 2 soldiers from different worlds, bound by the same understanding that some wars don't end when you leave the field. They just change shape. When he stood to go, he reached into his pocket again, pulled something out, a folded piece of paper. "Evans wrote this," he said. "Didn't want to give it to you himself. I think he's still figuring out how to look you in the eye." He handed it to her and walked away before she could reply. She waited until he was gone before unfolding it. The handwriting was tight, deliberate. "Senior Chief, what you did out there, I can't explain it and I can't justify leaving you behind. But I know what you saved. Not just lives, but the truth about what we are supposed to be. You didn't owe us anything. You still did the job. That's something I'll carry for the rest of my life. Semper Fi, even when I was a CA." She folded the note, tucked it into her jacket, and stared out over the water. "Semper Fi," she murmured softly, "even when you were." When the plane left the next morning, no one saluted her. No crowd, no ceremony. Just a quiet boarding manifest, a flight number that didn't exist on record, and a sealed set of orders that would take her somewhere no one could ask about. As the engines roared and the tarmac fell away, she felt the familiar stillness settle over her again. Not peace, not purpose, just the calm between storms. Through the small oval window, the coastline receded, blue turning to gray, gray to cloud, cloud to nothing. And for the first time since the desert, she allowed herself a small whisper of thought, barely audible even to herself. "Maybe this is who I was always meant to be." A shadow where others see only light. A whisper in places where noise can't survive. The kind of person who doesn't need to be remembered, as long as the mission is. Back at the base, days later, Roar received a sealed envelope with no sender. Inside was his Force Recon coin, the same one he'd given her. Except now, etched into the edge with a fine blade, were 3 words. "No one forgotten." He read them once, twice, then smiled, a sad, proud kind of smile. He placed the coin on his desk beside a photograph of his platoon, the one taken before the mission, the one where she sat in the background, almost invisible. Almost. Months later, The story of what happened in the desert began to circulate through the branches, half rumor, half myth. Some said it was an airstrike. Some said it was CIA. Some said it was a ghost. But among the ones who knew better, the ones who'd fought, bled, and lost enough to understand, there was a name spoken with quiet respect. Not shouted, not written. Just passed from one warrior to another like a secret prayer. Sharma. No rank, no prefix, just the name. And always the same ending whispered after it, the kind of truth that didn't need official reports to exist. They left her in the desert once and learned why they should never do that again. Because some lessons are written in ink. Others are written in blood. But the ones that last, the ones that echo, are written in silence. And for Anna Sharma, silence was the sharpest weapon of all. What happens to a soldier who's too good at disappearing? The jet sliced through cloud and distance, eastbound and unmarked. Inside, Senior Chief Anna Sharma sat alone in a row of empty seats. The hum of the engines was the only heartbeat she trusted now. She stopped asking where they were sending her. Orders came sealed, stamped, and simple. Redeployment classified. Outside, the world folded beneath her in shades of gray and gold, mountains, then desert, then sea. Different terrain, same silence. When they landed, it wasn't at a base with signs or flags, just a stretch of runway carved into jungle half hidden by mist. Men in plain fatigues waited without names or insignia. One of them, a tall lieutenant with sun-cracked skin, greeted her with a nod. "Welcome to Outpost Kilo," he said. "You're here to observe officially." "Unofficially?" she asked. He smiled faintly, "To remind us what happens when things fall apart." She followed him through narrow corridors built from shipping containers welded together. Everything smelled of oil, humidity, and secrecy. Her quarters were small. One cot, one desk, one sealed crate marked SIGINT experimental. When she pried it open, she found what she expected, the same black boxes, same antennas, same ghost of her last mission. Except this time, someone had added a note. Field test, frequency cross-modulation variant 7, objective counter-drone signal tracking, no failures. It was signed only with an initial, H. She recognized the handwriting, Commander Huxley, the man from the debrief, the one who'd said your father would have been proud. Pride wasn't the word she'd use. Duty maybe, guilt always. That night rain hammered the metal roof. The jungle outside hissed and steamed, alive with sound, 1,000 small hearts beating in darkness. Sharma sat at the desk, calibrating her gear, her movements precise and slow. Every now and then she'd stop and listen, not to the rain but to her own breath. It was steady, controlled. Always controlled. But somewhere beneath it, she felt the edge of something raw, something unspoken that had followed her from the desert, emptiness disguised as calm. The silence that had once been her weapon was starting to turn on her. 2 days later, the lieutenant briefed her on the situation. Local insurgents had begun using stolen reconnaissance drones, cheap, Chinese-made, but effective. They'd already taken down one resupply convoy. Her task was to trace the control signals back to the source. "We have men in the field," the lieutenant said. "Recon Unit 9, they'll keep you safe." Sharma raised an eyebrow. "Safe?" He hesitated. "You know what I mean." She nodded once. "No, I don't, but I'll manage." Recon Unit 9 was young, too young. They moved with confidence but not patience. They laughed too loud, loaded gear too fast, and looked at her like she was a legend wearing skin. "Ma'am, is it true?" one of them asked as they prepped to move out. "You took out a whole compound alone." She didn't look up from her pack. Stories grow in the retelling. Still another said, "Must have been wild." "It was quiet," she replied. "Wild comes later when you remember it." The team fell silent after that. They moved out before dawn, into jungle that breathed and watched. Every step was a whisper against mud and leaf. Sharma carried her modified honey badger, suppressor attached, optics tuned for the thick canopy. Her signal antenna extended from her pack like a thin spine, scanning the air for ghosts of transmission. By midday, they reached a ridge overlooking a valley scarred by logging roads. Somewhere below, the drones nested, small launchers hidden in cargo trucks, their operators bouncing signals off stolen satellites. The lieutenant checked his watch. "We hold here till night. You do your thing, Senior Chief." She set up her gear, tuning into the invisible hum that filled the sky. Frequencies layered over one another, static, music, fragments of speech. She filtered them, peeled them back like skin. And there it was. A faint pulsing signature. The heartbeat of a machine. She traced it to a clearing 3 kilometers east. "Found them," she said quietly. "They'll launch at 202 drones, same pattern as last strike." "Then we hit them first," the lieutenant said. Sharma looked up. "You're outnumbered 3-1. "We'll be ghosts," he said with a grin. Her voice didn't change. Ghosts make mistakes when they believe their own myths. He hesitated. "You'd rather we wait." "I'd rather you live." They attacked anyway. At 1:30, the jungle exploded with muzzle flashes. The drones never launched, the men did. Insurgents poured from the tree line, rifles blazing. The first Marine fell before he even shouted. The lieutenant barked orders, returning fire, but they were surrounded. Sharma stayed low, her mind cold, calculating angles, distances, outcomes. She could hear the lieutenant's voice over the comms, static cut and panicked. "Pull back, repeat pull." The transmission ended with a thud and silence. She exhaled once slow, then moved. The firefight became a blur of smoke and pulse fire. Sharma crawled through mud slick with rain and blood. She reached the lieutenant, chest wound, eyes wide with disbelief. He tried to speak, couldn't. She pressed a hand to his wound and looked at him, calm, steady. "You're not alone," she whispered. "He died anyway." She took his radio, switched to encrypted, and sent a single coded burst, her duress signal, the same one from the desert. Alive, alone, compromised. Lightning flashed overhead. The rain fell harder. And she realized how easily history repeats itself. By dawn, the jungle was quiet again, except for the hum of insects and the low buzz of her receiver. She was alone. 7 Marines down. No evac coming, command unaware. She sat under the wide leaves of a kapok tree, checking her ammo. 2 magazines, 1 sidearm, 1 knife. Same math as before. Different war. Through her headset, a faint crackle stirred insurgent chatter. She translated without thinking. They were celebrating, laughing about the ambush, planning to retrieve the drones and move west. And then she heard something else. A child's voice. Young, frightened, asking for his brother. Her breath caught, the first slip in her rhythm. She isolated the voice. It was local, civilian. The insurgents had taken villagers to use as porters. Collateral, expendable, invisible. She closed her eyes for 1 second, then opened them. The decision was already made. She wasn't leaving anyone behind, not again. She followed the signal trail through the valley, every step a ghost's echo, every heartbeat a reminder. By noon she'd reached the edge of their camp, 3 trucks, tarps stretched between them, smoke rising from cook fires. She counted 8 fighters, 2 civilians bound near the vehicles, one of them the boy whose voice she'd heard, barely 12. Sharma watched through her scope. Every instinct told her to wait for night. But the boy's voice carried again, crying this time. Her pulse steadied. And she moved. The first shot took the sentry cleanly, suppressed, silent. The second dropped a man, reaching for his rifle. The rest panicked, firing blind into trees. She circled wide, her movements measured, surgical. By the time they realized where she was, half of them were gone. The last 3 ran for the trucks. Mistake. She cut them down before they reached the door. Silence returned, thick and heavy. The boy stared at her, wide-eyed, frozen. She lowered her rifle and knelt. "It's over," she said softly. He didn't understand the words, but he felt the tone. He nodded slowly. She cut his restraints, then the woman beside him. "Go," she said, pointing toward the trail. "Follow the river. Someone will find you." The woman hesitated. "Who are you?" Sharma met her gaze. "No one." She destroyed the drones with thermite from her kit, the flames hissing and spitting like living things. When it was done, she stood in the clearing, rain cooling the heat. Smoke curled upward, carrying the ashes of machines and mistakes alike. She pressed her radio again, this time not the duress code, but a full burst transmission. "Coordinates, situation report, status, mission complete." Static answered, then faintly a voice. "Copy, Senior Chief. We have your signal, sit tight, extraction inbound." She almost smiled. Almost. Hours later, as she waited for the helicopter, she sat on a fallen log, hands resting on her knees. The boy's frightened eyes lingered in her mind. The lieutenant's last breath. The familiar silence after the storm. Patterns repeating, like radio waves bouncing through eternity. For a moment, she wondered if she'd ever truly left the desert, or if every battlefield just borrowed its shape. When the helo arrived, the downwash scattered ash into the air. She climbed aboard, ducking under the rotor, mud streaking her uniform. The crew chief helped her in. "Hell of a mess down there," he said over the headset. "You all right?" She looked out the open door at the jungle slipping away beneath them. "I'm always all right," she said. But the words sounded emptier than before. Back at Outpost Kilo, the rain still fell. Command gathered around her report like moths around flame. The mission was a success, drones destroyed, civilians freed, enemy neutralized. The lieutenant's name was already typed onto the memorial list. Sharma stood outside the ops room afterward, the jungle steaming around her. The air smelled of wet earth and gunpowder. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the folded letter from Captain Evans, the one she still carried. The paper was soft now, edges frayed. She read it again. "You didn't owe us anything, you still did the job." She folded it back carefully and slipped it away. Maybe that was all she would ever be, the one who still did the job. The one who came back from places no one else would survive, carrying silence like a medal no one pinned. That night she stood at the edge of the compound, watching the rain blur the jungle lights into a soft, golden haze. For the first time she let the calm drop, just a little, just enough to feel the weight underneath. She thought of her father, of Roar's quiet respect, of Evan's shame, of the boy's terrified eyes. And she whispered to the darkness, "I won't forget any of you." The rain answered. Somewhere inside her, the storm began again, not to destroy, but to remind her she was still alive. Because survival isn't silence. It's the noise you keep buried. What's more dangerous, the battlefield or the silence that follows it? 3 months later, the jungle was a memory sealed in reports and medals. The mission was labeled a success, low visibility, high impact. Senior Chief Anna Sharma had become something she never asked to be, a ghost turned headline. It started with whispers, same as before, but this time the whispers grew teeth. Someone in public affairs leaked a story. A lone SEAL operative saving hostages, taking out drones, eliminating insurgents. It was too cinematic for the world to ignore. The press called her the Phantom Operator. The Pentagon called her classified. And Anna called it what it was, noise. She walked the corridors of Washington now, not sand or mud beneath her boots, but polished marble. The walls echoed differently here. Every step sounded like a question. She'd been reassigned to strategic consultation, a vague title that meant she was being studied more than employed. One day, a civilian in a tailored suit escorted her into a conference room lined with glass. Outside, the Capitol dome glimmered under pale afternoon light. "Senior Chief Sharma," he said with a politician's smile, "you've become quite an inspiration." She didn't sit. "To who?" "To everyone," he said smoothly. "Men, women, young recruits. You're living proof that precision, restraint, and instinct can redefine what special operations means. We'd like to feature you in a training initiative, morale videos, leadership materials, perhaps even a keynote for the academy." Anna looked at him for a long moment. Her expression never changed. "You want a speech?" "Just your story," he said. "People deserve to hear it." She finally sat, folding her hands on the table. "People don't want the story. They want the myth. My story ends with people dying." The man hesitated, still smiling but thinner now. "With respect, Chief, that's not how the country sees it." She leaned forward slightly. "Then maybe the country's looking the wrong way." The man blinked. She stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the city, neat, clean, detached from the sound of blood or sand or rain. "This place," she said softly, "doesn't understand what survival costs." "Then help them understand," he said quickly. "You have a voice, use it." She turned, her gaze sharp, almost tired. "My silence speaks louder." He didn't follow her when she left. No one ever did. Outside, the air was cool. The streets moved like clockwork, civilians rushing to jobs, taxis honking, tourists smiling. Anna watched them for a long moment. The rhythm felt foreign, almost obscene in its normalcy. A car slowed beside her, black government plates. The passenger window rolled down. Commander Huxley sat inside, same calm demeanor, same unreadable eyes. "Get in," he said. She did. They drove in silence for a while. The city blurred past monuments, memorials, history carved in stone. Finally, Huxley said, "They're turning you into a story." "I noticed." "Good stories make good funding," he said dryly. "They won't stop until they've gotten what they want." She looked out the window. "They'll get tired eventually." "No," he said quietly. "They'll replace you. That's what happens when legends don't play along." She turned toward him. "You didn't call me here to warn me." He nodded once. "No, I called you here because there's something you should see." He handed her a folder, manila, stamped restricted. Inside were grainy satellite images. A compound, desert terrain again, familiar and cruel. "New threat?" she asked. "Old one," he said. "The same network you dismantled 2 years ago. Someone's rebuilding it. Different leadership, same funding. They've adapted." Her eyes traced the images. "You want me back out there?" "Not officially," he said. "This isn't a mission, not yet. Consider it observation." She closed the folder. "Observation doesn't save lives." "No," Huxley said, "but it decides whose lives get saved later." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then she asked the question that had been burning since she landed. "Why me again?" Huxley looked at her with something close to understanding. "Because you don't run from ghosts, Senior Chief. You talk to them." That night she walked along the Potomac, the city lights shimmering on the water like fractured stars. She moved in silence, no uniform, no weapon, just the weight of what she'd already survived. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the jungle, the boy, the lieutenant. And before them the desert, the sandstorm, the silence. She stopped by a bench near the river's edge and sat. The air smelled of damp concrete and autumn. A jogger passed by, earbuds in, music blocking out the world. Anna envied that, the ability to turn off the noise. She couldn't, not anymore. From her pocket she took the Force Recon coin. The one she, once given back to Roar and somehow, found returned to her in the mail months later, wrapped in plain paper. No note, just the coin. On its edge, the engraving still glinted under the streetlight. No one forgotten. She turned it in her fingers and whispered, "Then why does it feel like everyone forgets?" 2 days later, she flew to Nevada, the test range where Huxley's observation would begin. The landscape below looked like the edge of memory, same colors, same emptiness. She wondered if the Earth remembered what had bled into it. When she landed, a small team met her. Contractors, analysts, techs, no uniforms, just badges. A woman in her 40s approached, blonde hair tied tight, eyes sharp. "Dr. Kellen," she introduced herself. "We're running an adaptive warfare simulation based on your last mission data." Sharma frowned. "Simulation?" Kellen nodded. "We're feeding real-time satellite intel into AI algorithms, testing how your field strategies translate into predictive models." "So you're teaching a machine how I think?" Kellen smiled slightly. "How you survive." Sharma looked at the monitors inside the control room. Her missions, her moves, her choices replayed as digital ghosts on screens. Each shot, each path, each moment of silence dissected into data. "They turned my life into a pattern," she murmured. Kellen crossed her arms. "You broke pattern, that's what makes you valuable." Anna stared at the monitors. "No, that's what makes me human." Later, alone in the barracks, she sat on the edge of her bunk, staring at her reflection in the small metal mirror. The uniform, the rank, the scars, all still there, but the person behind them blurred. What did it mean to be a weapon that the world applauded only after it was done bleeding? She reached for the folded letter again, Evan's handwriting soft from being opened too many times. "You didn't owe us anything." She wondered if she ever would again. Outside, thunder rolled over the desert. The storm came fast, sand swirling under floodlights. She walked out into it, letting the grit sting her skin. It was almost comforting. She whispered to the wind, like she had once whispered to the rain. "Where do I go when the fight ends?" The storm didn't answer. But inside she already knew. For people like her, it never truly ends. It just changes form. Morning came. Huxley's voice crackled through the radio in her quarters. "Senior Chief, briefing in 10. When she entered the control room, Dr. Kellen gestured toward the monitors. Something changed. On screen, live feed imagery showed new movement at the compound, a convoy arriving. Vehicles, armed men, crates being offloaded. One of the crates bore the same insignia she'd seen before, the mark of the same cell that left her for dead in the desert. Huxley said quietly, "You don't have to go back." She looked at him, calm but certain. "I was never done." He sighed, "Unofficial op, no extraction guarantee. You'll be on your own again." She gave a half smile, not bravado, but something closer to acceptance. "Seems to be a pattern." That evening, as she prepared her gear, she paused. The jungle, the desert, the boy, Evans. All of it leading here. Every time she'd been left alone, she'd survived. But this time felt different. This time, she wasn't surviving for the mission. She was surviving to close a loop. Before boarding the transport, she wrote a note and sealed it in an envelope. She handed it to Huxley. "If I don't come back, give this to Roar," she said. He nodded, taking it carefully. "He'll know what it means." "He'll know," she said softly. Then she turned, walked toward the aircraft, and disappeared into the roaring wind just as she had before. As the plane lifted, the desert stretched beneath her, endless, waiting, silent. She thought about what Huxley had said. You don't run from ghosts, you talk to them. Maybe that was true. Maybe that's why the desert kept calling her back. Not to die in it, but to finish the conversation she'd started years ago. Because some stories don't end with victory. They end where they began, in the quiet space between courage and consequence. And Anna Sharma was finally going back there, not to prove anything, but to listen to what the silence had been trying to tell her all along. Why do some people keep walking back into the fire they escaped? The C-130 dropped her into darkness again, the same stretch of nowhere where her story had once ended. Except now, it wasn't an ending. It was a reckoning. Wind roared over the ramp as she stepped out, boots sinking into sand that still remembered the old war. The air was cold, sharp, whispering across dunes that hid ghosts instead of shadows. She crouched low as the aircraft lifted away. Within seconds, the sky swallowed its sound. And there it was again. Silence. The kind that tested your pulse. She moved by moonlight, carrying only what she needed: her suppressed rifle, a compact signal rig, and the worn Force Recon coin in her pocket, no one forgotten. Each step left a trail that the wind erased behind her. She liked it that way. The compound lay 10 kilometers east, tucked behind a ridge of broken stone. Satellite feed had shown movement, heat signatures, trucks. But the real signal, the one she trusted, was instinct. The faint tremor underfoot, the sense that something alive, something aware, waited out there. She whispered into her mic, "Sierra 1 in field, moving silent." No answer. Good, she preferred it that way. By dawn, she reached high ground overlooking the valley. Through the scope, she saw what the images hadn't shown: new walls, fresh guards, flags that didn't belong to any country. And there in the center yard, a communication array. Small, makeshift, deadly. The same frequency signature she'd chased years ago pulsed faintly across her receiver, like a ghost breathing. They hadn't just rebuilt the network, they'd learned from her. For a long moment she just watched, calm, detached, but beneath it all the old ache began again, not anger, not vengeance, just the pull of unfinished work. She spent 2 days observing. Nights crouched beneath rock, eyes scanning through infrared haze. Days hidden under a net, sleeping in fragments, minds cycling through data. By the third morning she'd mapped their entire rotation. 12 fighters, 2 vehicles, 1 external fuel tank, and to her surprise 3 civilians, engineers probably, forced labor. Her throat tightened, history repeating almost mockingly. She whispered to herself, "Not this time." Night 3, she moved. The air was still, every breath condensed in the cold. She crept down the ridge, using shadow like armor. At 200, she planted the signal disruptor, same device she'd used years ago, now modified by her own hands. It pulsed softly, invisible to anyone not listening for ghosts. By 210, she was inside the perimeter, crouched behind a fuel drum, watching the guards drift toward fatigue. She waited for the rhythm to break. It always did. Then she struck. 3 rounds, 3 drops, no sound except the quiet click of breath between shots. She moved fast, cut the generator lines, jammed the comms, slipped through the side door. Inside, the walls were rough concrete, half-built, smelling of sweat and oil. Voices echoed faintly. She followed them down a corridor lit by a single flickering bulb. When she turned the corner, she froze. In the center of the room, the same flag, the same insignia, the same mark that had been on the men who'd left her to die years ago. Her hand tightened on the rifle. And then she heard laughter, male voices, relaxed, unguarded, one of them speaking English. She moved closer. Through a crack in the wall, she saw them: 2 contractors, Americans. They weren't insurgents. They were rebuilding the very network she destroyed, under a different name, for a different buyer. Private war, profit. Reconstruction through corruption. It hit her harder than any bullet ever could. She stepped back into shadow, heart pounding once, twice, then settling. Her voice in her mind was cold, measured. Finish the mission, but make them remember why you came back. She returned to the yard, set charges near the fuel line, and linked them to her detonator. Then she went back inside. The civilians were huddled near the workshop. She signaled for silence, cut their restraints, pointed to the exit. One of them whispered, "Who are you?" She looked at him, mud, dust, and memory in her eyes. No one you'll read about. They fled. By the time the first alarm sounded, she was already in position. Men shouted, searchlights flared. She fired once. The shot cracked through the compound, clean and final. The first contractor dropped before he could even turn. The second ran for the truck. Mistake. She triggered the detonator. The explosion ripped through the yard, a bloom of orange swallowing metal, flame licking the night sky. She didn't run, she watched, because this wasn't revenge, it was closure. And when the dust began to settle, she whispered to the silence, "We're even now." But the desert wasn't done testing her. As she turned to leave, she caught movement in her periphery, another figure, limping from the flames, rifle raised. He fired. The round tore through her shoulder, spinning her to the ground. Pain bloomed white-hot, but she rolled, steadied, returned fire. One shot, center mass. The man fell. For a moment she stayed there on the sand, clutching her wound, the wind already beginning to erase footprints. She could feel her pulse fatting into the same rhythm as the desert, slow, steady, eternal. Her vision blurred, but she smiled faintly. "Not today," she whispered. She pulled a field dressing from her pack, pressed it tight, and staggered toward the ridge. At sunrise, the horizon bled gold. Smoke curled lazily from the ruins below. She climbed higher until she could see the whole valley. The compound gone. The mark erased. And for the first time since her father's death, she felt something like stillness, not emptiness, not sorrow, just the quiet sense that the circle had closed. She sat down on the ridge, breathing carefully, blood seeping through her sleeve. From her pocket, she took out the envelope she'd given Huxley to pass to Roar, then retrieved the duplicate she'd kept for herself. She opened it now, reading her own handwriting, words she'd written in case she didn't return. "If you're reading this, it means I finally stopped running from the silence. It also means the silence didn't win. Tell them none of it was about glory. Tell them it was about duty, the kind that doesn't end when the mission does. And if they ask who I was, tell them, just a woman who kept her promise." She folded it again and tucked it into her vest. Then slowly she stood. In the distance, she could hear Rotor's faint approaching. For a brief second, she thought of walking away again, disappearing into the horizon like she always did. But this time she stayed. The helicopter circled overhead, dust swirling around her. 2 medics jumped down, shouting, waving her in. She raised a hand, steady, calm, then climbed aboard. As they lifted off, she looked out the open door at the desert, her old battlefield, her old teacher. It stretched endlessly beneath her, the same color as memory. One of the medics asked over the headset, "Chief, what happened down there?" She didn't look at him, just unfinished business. He nodded, not pressing further. She leaned back, eyes half closed, listening to the hum of the blades. The sound wasn't war anymore, it was release. Weeks later, she sat again by the ocean, the same pier where Roar had once brought her coffee. The sea was gray, restless, familiar. The bandage on her shoulder itched beneath the wind. She watched the horizon and thought of everyone she'd met. Evans, Roar, Huxley, the nameless Marines, the civilians, the child. They all blurred into one long thread of memory, stitched by duty and silence. From her pocket she pulled the Force Recon coin and held it over the water. The engraving glinted, no one forgotten. For a long moment she hesitated, then she closed her fist. "No one," she whispered again. She didn't throw it. Some things weren't meant to be released. They were meant to be carried, quietly, permanently. When the sun dipped low, she rose to leave. A young sailor jogging past slowed and saluted her, eyes wide. "Ma'am," he said, "are you the one from the article, the SEAL who?" She cut him off gently. "No, you've got the wrong person." He nodded awkwardly, smiling. "Right, sorry, you just look like someone who's been through a lot." She smiled faintly. Aren't we all? Then she walked away, boots quiet on the pier, the sound fading into wind and waves. That night, somewhere on a base half a world away, Huxley received a package. No return address. Inside was a small black notebook. On the last page, in neat block letters, it read, "Mission complete. No one left behind." He closed it slowly, his jaw tightening. Then, almost to himself, he whispered, "Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts." He placed the notebook beside a framed photograph of his unit, and, for the first time in years, allowed himself to exhale. Far away, the desert lay silent again. No explosion, no footsteps, no ghosts. Just wind carving lines into the sand, the same wind that had once carried her breath, her fight, her promise. Somewhere out there, the earth kept its secrets. And maybe that was enough. Because legends fade, reports gather dust. But the acts born of quiet conviction, they last. Anna Sharma walked back into the world she'd never truly left. No medals, no headlines, just purpose. She moved through the crowd unseen, the way she preferred. Every life she'd touched carried a piece of her story, whether they knew it or not. And in the silence that followed her steps, the world whispered back the only truth that mattered. She was never abandoned. She was becoming. The sea rolled on. The wind shifted. And somewhere, in the space between memory and peace, the desert finally rested.